Number 1, at that depth, water pressure suppresses the explosive force of the volcano's eruptions, allowing scientists to blank them up close via, I think it was via remotely operated vehicles. Okay, so we look at these choices here. We have watch and observe, watch, observe to see, visually watch. This is a good example of a question that's all about redundancy. You don't want to repeat anything that is already been stated, right? You don't want to be repetitive or redundant. And so here we look at watch and observe. To watch and to observe means the same thing. Observe to see, well, you typically try to observe something to see something. And visually watch, there's really no other way, I guess, to watch something but visually. So those are all redundant, and all we need is just watch. Nice and short. Remember, all things being equal, shorter is better. Here's a case where shorter is better because the other choices are redundant. Number 2, we want to see where should we put sentence 5. So we go back and look at the previous or original sentence 5, and we see what it says. It says, at that depth, water pressure suppresses the explosive force of the volcano's eruptions, allowing scientists to watch and observe them up close via remotely operated vehicles. So the key part I see here is this phrase, at that depth. This has got to be referring to a specific depth, right? That doesn't make sense, that phrase, if we're not pointing to some depth mentioned very likely in the previous sentence. And so looking at the options here, I can either keep it where it is, but I look at sentence 4 and I don't see at that depth referring to anything there. So I can also put it after 1, 2, or 3, and notice what I see in 1, 60 miles north of Guam and more than 1,700 feet under the ocean surface is that. And then at that depth, it goes on from there. And you could also check not only does 1 lead into 5, and it does very well, but does 5 lead into 2? And it does. It connects very well with this discussion of this volcano and this sort of being able to observe the eruptions and what results from the eruption. So this fits really nicely after 1 and leads into 2 very well. So for number 2, we're going to go with choice B. Number 3, we've got to pick the right transitional word. So NW Rota 1 is far below the ocean's photic zone, where sunlight drives photosynthesis. Blank, bacteria supporting a unique food web have adapted to this perpetually dark environment. So the previous sentence says that this volcano is below the photic zone, where sunlight drives photosynthesis, and the next part of the sentence says that bacteria have adapted to this perpetually dark environment. So what we're looking for here is some phrase of contrast to show that, even though this place is not conducive to life that requires photosynthesis because there's no sunlight, despite that, however, or we might say nevertheless, bacteria have adapted to this perpetually dark environment, right? We're showing a contrast. Nevertheless, meaning like despite these circumstances, despite this situation, this other thing is true. And that's exactly what we're looking for here. The problem with the others, afterward, there's no chronology here. Furthermore, we're not building directly on the previous sentence in a not cause and effect, but in a sort of similarly constructed or composed idea. We are contrasting. We're shifting to a different idea or showing how something is true despite the truth of something else, and that doesn't work with furthermore. And similarly, we're not showing any sort of similarity between these two sentences. So the best choice here is A. 4, the bacteria have evolved to use hydrogen sulfide instead of sunlight for the energy that drives their metabolic processes, and hydrothermal venting is the source of the chemical soup necessary to support, and then we've got a pronoun choice. So what is the pronoun that has to go here? What is, really the first question is, what is the noun that we have to have this pronoun refer to? What is the antecedent? What is that noun that this pronoun is supposed to be replacing? So what is it that is being supported? Very likely, it's probably supposed to be supporting the metabolic processes, right? It's the metabolic processes that are being supported by the chemical soup, which comes from the hydrothermal venting. Even if you thought it was the bacteria, could be bacteria. Let's see, have evolved to use hydrogen sulfide. Yeah, honestly, it could go either way, whether it's bacteria or metabolic processes. The key is it's plural. both of these are plural. And you know bacteria is plural because notice later they use this pronoun there, which indicates to you that it's plural. So either way, this is plural. We can't use anything singular. So these three are out, and so we've got to go with them. So in 5, we have a list of things. The heat drives chemical reactions that remove oxygen, sulfates, and then we need something in a similar form, something that's parallel to these two, so some sort of noun, some sort of thing. And so probably we just want chemicals, other chemicals, right? Oxygen, sulfates, and other chemicals. So we would want to delete the remove, just keep the end. We definitely want ends because we need an end to connect the last element of our list to the first parts of our list, so we can get rid of B and C. And so down to A versus D. D makes it parallel. We don't need to repeat remove. That's already here introducing this list. And so we go with D. Loihi shrimp, originally thought to exist only around an undersea volcano near Hawaii, survive by using tiny shear-like claws to ... Okay, so the core subject of the sentence is the loihi shrimp. And the verb of the sentence, the verb that goes with the subject, is here. And in fact, all of this is really the core sentence. Loihi shrimp survive by using tiny shear-like claws to ... That's our core sentence. So this thing here is a phrase that has been inserted into the middle of this main sentence. And if you note, we already use a dash to set off the first part, and so to be consistent, we need to use a dash to close off the second. Theoretically, you could have done comma, comma, but here our hands are tied. We already have a dash here, so I need to match it with a dash here to completely surround that phrase with two dashes to set it off from the main sentence and indicate that it's extra information, that it's non-essential. And so that gets us choice C. Number 7, which choice most effectively sets up the information in the next sentence? So what is the information in the next sentence? So it says here, they feed on the loihi shrimp and other organisms that are overcome by the toxic plumes of volcanic gas and ash. So probably need to show who the they is in order to set up this sentence. So let's look at the previous sentence. It says, shrimp of that species also graze on bacterial filaments as juveniles. And then our sentence. They feed on the loihi shrimp and other organisms that ... Okay, so what's going to lead into this? Let's check our choices. A, resulting from their ability to cope with the noxious environment around the volcano. Okay, is it really leading into this part about, maybe a little bit where the prey are being overwhelmed by the toxic plumes and they're not? But let's just see what else there is. Sometimes you're going to find a couple choices that might be, okay, but you're really looking for the best choice out of the lot. So always make sure you check all 4. How about B? But their adaptations are not yet fully understood by the scientific community. That seems very off topic. We don't discuss that in the next sentence. It seems to just be more general about the science, which we don't want to talk about at this point. Thriving in an unusual ecosystem that also includes crabs, limpets, and barnacles. So again, almost too specific. It doesn't take this up any further in the next sentences. But I like D, because check out what it says here. It says, but as adults, their claws are large enough for the shrimp to be predators. They feed on the loihi shrimp and other organisms that... Okay, so kind of getting the context here. Go back another sentence. It says, the loihi shrimp spend most of their time grazing on the bacteria and evading another previously unknown species of shrimp. Shrimp of that species also graze on bacterial filaments as juveniles. But as adults, their claws are large enough for the shrimp to be predators. They, in other words, the other species of shrimp, feed on the loihi shrimp and other organisms that ... So notice how there's sort of 2 aspects to D that make it the strongest option and therefore the right answer. First, within the sentence itself, the first part of the sentence talks about what these shrimp eat as juveniles. And then the second part of the sentence talks about what they eat as adults. So there's a logic to the sentence. There's a comparison between how these shrimp are changing their diets as they get older and bigger. So that's good. But it also connects the whole discussion, not only into the next sentence, but also really this whole section of the paragraph where it's talking about this other species of shrimp that the loihi shrimp have to avoid. And why do they have to avoid them? Because, as we learn, when these shrimp become adults, their claws are large enough to be predators, and therefore they feed on the loihi shrimp, and that's why the loihi shrimp have to run away. So D does the best job integrating this sentence with itself this sentence with the next sentence and really putting the entire paragraph together to make it a consistent logical whole. And that's why we get D. Number 8, combining these sentences. During an underwater eruption, steam quickly condenses. The steam leaves only carbon dioxide bubbles and droplets. Okay, so let's see what we have. Steam quickly condenses and leaves only carbon dioxide bubbles. I mean, that's pretty good, right? The steam is doing two things. It's condensing and leaving the bubbles. So that's seeming pretty good. It also is the shortest of the 4, which is always a good sign. Let's see what the others are. Steam quickly condenses, having to leave only carbon dioxide bubbles. It's sort of strange, this having to phrase. It's wordy, it's awkward, sort of unclear. Thereafter leaving seems a little unnecessary, a little wordy. It's not terrible grammatically, but just a bit strange, giving that sort of chronology. It seems like unnecessary words. And then D is by far the worst choice because it's just very wordy and long. And all you need to do is just say A, right? Nice and condensed. Most of the time for these questions, the short one is going to be, if not the answer, at least a very strong competitor. And yeah, here it is. Nice and condensed, puts the sentences together, makes sense logically. So, choice A. In 9, we have a comparison error. We need to make sure we're comparing like to like. So the first part says, this means that the water near NW1 Rhoda is more acidic than what? Well, on the one hand, we're comparing the water near our NW Rhoda one. So we want to be able to compare something like that to the water. And so when I look at the original, is more acidic than that of stomach acid. What it's saying here is than the water of stomach acid. That's what the that would be referring to, because that's what the previous comparison is. And that doesn't really make sense. In fact, it actually makes more sense just to compare one liquid to the other. So the water near NW Rhoda 1 to the stomach acid, straight up. So here's a case where we don't need a that of or those of or see. You can just say stomach or stomach acid. So the whole sentence would read, this means that the water near NW Rhoda 1 is more acidic than stomach acid. And so that's a good comparison because we're comparing one type of thing to the other similar type of thing, one fluid to another fluid, one acidic fluid to another acidic fluid. So that's consistent, so we get D. In 10, we got to put the apostrophe in the right place, or 2 apostrophes, or 1, or none. So let's see. As the carbon dioxide level in Earth's atmosphere rises, the world's oceans absorb more carbon dioxide. So first we'll start with oceans. The original has an apostrophe S, which seems to indicate that this is possessive of the word absorb. That doesn't really make sense because you can only possess another noun, and absorb is a verb here. So it looks like we want oceans because we want it to be plural. We want to say the world's oceans, like all of them. So we're going to keep the S, but we're just going to get rid of the apostrophe. And so actually that gets rid of A and B pretty quickly. So now we have to think about what's going on with this word. Now, we've already eliminated A, but actually worlds is wrong because this implies a plural worlds. S apostrophe means the word you're making possessive is plural, and there's only one world that likely that we're talking about here. So we do want it to be possessive though, because we're talking about the oceans in this world, the oceans of this world. The world does possess these oceans, but we just want it to be the singular apostrophe S, and so that's why we're going to go with C. We do need an apostrophe, so we can't go with none, so C is our best answer. Here we have to decide in 11 whether to add this phrase. And so let's see. As the carbon dioxide level in Earth's atmosphere rises, the world's ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide, which increases their acidity. Okay, they're referring to the oceans. This whole paragraph is talking about acidity of this water and how life can adjust to acidic conditions. If you look at the next sentence, it talks about how life adjusts to very acidic conditions, which is important if the oceans are getting more acidic as they absorb carbon dioxide. So this does seem like something we want to add. It helps explain the connection of the world absorbing carbon dioxide into the oceans with the overall topic, which is the acidity of water. And so as they say with A, yes, because it explains the relevance, there's our key word, of the sentence to the point made in the paragraph. That's exactly why you want to add something, because it's relevant, because it's meaningful, because it's on topic. Yes, because it helps the reader understand why organisms near NW1 Rhoda 1 or NW Rhoda 1 evolved the way they did. Doesn't say anything in this part about evolution, or this is about oceans in general, not just about NW Rhoda 1. And then the no's are out because we know it's going to be a yes. But you could also check those explanations, and you'll see those explanations don't really work. So for C, it doesn't really repeat information presented earlier. And with D, as we've discussed, it is quite relevant. So this is not irrelevant. So best choice here is A.